So what's the kind of the response to this, right? So, by what standard? Who's to say? Well, it's all well and good that Bart Ehrman is talking about, helping people, respect other people, try to do what's right. We would agree with this, right? I would think that most people would have this type of understanding, but it's in spite of themselves that they believe this. What is the standard? What is the ultimate standard? Well, those who believe in God argue that we should care because God created us to care and commanded that we love others. Right. That's part of it. We're all image bearers of God. When we encounter somebody, we should have that understanding. And in fact, we do have that understanding. That's why you have these types of moral systems spring up in spite of evolutionary process. Struggle, survival of the fittest.
Exactly.
But someone who's down on their luck, don't kick the dirt over their grave. Help them up out of the pit.
Exactly.
Oh, well, why? That's taking resources away from me. That person clearly didn't survive in the environment that they were put into. Good luck next time. Hope your family had more kids. Maybe.
So the point here is that as believers, we recognize, since God has created everyone and created them in His image, they have value, they have worth, and therefore we should care for each individual, right? However, and God also has commanded us to love everybody.
Right, right. I mean, that's a big part of the Christian worldview in that. But without God, compassion for others is nothing but kind of chemical changes in the brain. I do it because it makes me happy. Poof, there goes my epidural, the thing that makes me feel good and I get warm fuzzies. Okay, is that worth it for the survival of the human race? I'm not sure. But suffering is meaningless, violence is meaningless, all is meaningless.
Without God.
Without God.
Yeah. Boy, is that true. Yeah. So without God, Ehrman has no grounding for his morality, no basis for his morality. He can act moral, right? He can desire moral outcomes, but there's no basis for it in his worldview, right? And what's more, if he responds to the question, who decides what's right and wrong, with, well, right is what is most helpful to the human race, this only leads to something akin to the initial question, right? After all, as we said earlier, right, what is most helpful for the human race? Well, Hitler and a whole list of others would disagree with Ehrman on what is best for the human race, right? Mm-hmm. And so, who's to decide, right? So there's no grounding here. There's no standard. Where does the standard come from, right?
So we're, again, back to the question of who decides what is right or wrong. That's kind of what we talked about. Apparently, at least in this world, Ehrman himself gets to decide what is right or wrong. Ultimately, he's the standard and decides that God's got the problem.
Well, okay. So he becomes the standard. Yeah. Okay.
And I'm sure many people who have this type of non-theistic understanding come to this conclusion, is ultimately we have to come to a internal realization of how best to do it. But where do you go from there? Yeah. Do I get people together as a collective and impose my will upon others because I know what's right and best for society? Do you do that in other things like economics or moving culture? Should you do that, or should you let culture just evolve kind of without a kind of higher monkey brain of trying to manipulate it? Or do you have people that try even to do that? Well, that's been kind of the struggle of Western society since, its foundation. But Ehrman has never told us where he gets this notion of right or wrong. Regardless of whether God has a problem, one thing is clear: Bart Ehrman has a problem. Without God, Ehrman has no legitimate or sufficient basis for his morality.
And that's a problem.
Right. Yeah. You might not think it's a problem, but ultimately what it comes down to is standards. And so that's what we're going to be covering here, is kind of his four claims then for where he's coming from.